Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to the Safe and Welcoming Schools Professional Development Live webinar. I am Dr. Janice Phelps, and I am one of the directors here at LACOE. And today I have the privilege of introducing you to Dr. Laura McMullin from UCLA Prevention Center of Excellence. She is going to be walking us through and guiding us through a topic of cultivating well-being and resilience in schools. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Jewel Forbes, who is going to do a formal introduction of our speaker this evening. Jewel Forbes.
Thanks, Janice. We are so excited to host Dr. Laura McMullin for today's webinar. Dr. Laura McMullin has over 20 years of experience in transformative education, working within a social justice framework. She has fulfilled a variety of roles, including being a K-12 public school teacher in both Los Angeles and New York City, a university researcher and lecturer, teacher educator, and professional development facilitator. Currently, she is in the role of curriculum developer with the Department of Mental Health UCLA Prevention Center of Excellence. Dr. McMullin specializes in supporting teacher well-being and resilience with a focus on mindfulness, a foundation for social, emotional, and relational well-being. Dr. McMullin has a BA in sociology from UC Berkeley, a master's in social justice education from UCLA, and a PhD in holistic education from NYU. Through her research and teaching experience in higher education, Dr. McMullin developed a model of holistic and integrative education that has dynamic well-being at the core. She's passionate about supporting healing and well-being in education and is deeply inspired by the resiliency of the human spirit and the power of community in nourishing the potential for personal and systematic transformation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Laura McMullin.
Thank you so much, Jewel, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. We're gonna get started with just a warm up to say hello to each other and to just share a little bit of gratitude for anything that you might want to share today, just by way of getting started. We're all coming from different places, and we know that gratitude is a research-based practice that has lots of benefits. And so I just thought we would start by inviting you all to share something that you're grateful for. It could be really small or medium or enormous. So let's go ahead and just put that in the chat. Let's see, anything that you are wanting to share. I had a lovely walk this afternoon in the park. I'm grateful for that. Janice says family, life, health, family. My cat, yes, health. Grateful for the sun. Yes, Susie, being healthy. Absolutely, Vanessa. Family, family of puppies. Oh my goodness. Family and friends. Yes, family. Awesome, Susan. Coworkers, the wonderful weather. Yes, Kyle. It's beautiful today. Time to exercise. Awesome, Michelle. We have a healthy group here. This is wonderful. Amazing students and an upcoming weekend. Awesome, Emily. My fellow tech team. Thank you, Alan. Yay, lots of appreciation, health, family, friends, colleagues, puppies, sunshine. Wonderful. Well, it's really nice to start with gratitude. It really helps to shift our focus. Perhaps there may have been some stresses along the day today, and gratitude helps us also acknowledge the wonderful things in our lives. Vicky says, grateful for opportunities to grow. Yes, and health and well-being. Perfect. Well, feel free to keep sharing. We are going to move forward. And what I thought we could start with is just a moment. This is a 1-minute practice to really come into this space together. And so we all have come from different, types of, days. We're all coming from different places. And so just like our students or our colleagues, when we come into a staff meeting or into our classroom, we've all come from different places and may have had lots of different experiences. So we're going to take 1 minute to essentially come into the space together, get ourselves a little grounded, centered, and receptive for learning together. And we're going to use the tool of video for this 1 minute well-being practice. So when I play the video, I'm just going to invite you to like activate and open up all of your senses. So we're going to be looking at the video, listening, see what sounds you hear. Imagine maybe what it feels like to be in that space, maybe what smells you might be able to access. And then pay attention to your breathing. So just like breathe it in. There we go. So I hope you enjoyed that. I never want to click out of that video, by the way. I just get so immersed in that beautiful scene. So that was 1 minute and about a minute. And it's a very simple way to transition into a learning space. And so I just would like to plant the seed that if you haven't yet considered an intentional transition into a learning space, it can be helpful. It can just be, it's a supportive way to just come in to the space together, get a little bit centered and then receptive to learning. And so it could happen, in a staff meeting or again in the classroom. So just a little seed around the value of intentional transitions before we dive right into content. Okay, so now let's begin. And we're going to begin by acknowledging that you are a real superhero. Every single one of us who are in education, these last 2 years have been really intense. And so I just really want to start by acknowledging each and every person that's here and all of your colleagues who are not here and all of the parents and community members and students who might not be here. That really, this has been quite a couple of years for educators. And when I say educators, that includes every role in the school site. So counselors, psychologists, even nurses and administrators, teachers, aides, everyone any adult that works in schools to me is a superhero. And so, just wanted to acknowledge that there's been some very intense stressors over these last 2 years. So obviously the pandemic has been so huge for all of us around the world. We have had to really contend with the fact that there's systemic racism. It's so profound and historical, and work towards dismantling anything that we can do to support equity, inclusion, diversity, racial healing, justice. So, these are big, deep topics, and in schools, we respond to them as best as we can. There's been identity-based harassment related to the pandemic. Obviously, the shift into distance learning was monumental for educators, and then back in person in that transition, tending to students' academic and social emotional needs. Maybe there's been some secondary traumatic stress that some of us have had to, deal with. Maybe some profound loss and grief throughout these last 2 years related to the pandemic. There's been family needs, financial concerns, role conflicts, so many hats worn at once, and then just overall uncertainty. which continues to be the case in some ways. And so just wanted to acknowledge that, every single person has been managing as best as possible. And it's a lot. It is a lot for each person, for each school, for each, team. And so just wanted to acknowledge the heroism within our education, all of the adults that are here. So I would just like to invite you to think about for yourself, what are some qualities or strengths that you personally have had to rely on over these last 2 years to move through the pandemic and all the related challenges? So let's just surface on the chat. Let's surface some of the strengths either that you've had to rely on or that you see in your colleagues or students. So let's get some, sense of humor. Thank you, Nancy. Yes, a little levity goes a long way. What else? Flexibility, absolutely. Positive mindset and flexibility, yes. Prayer, oh, absolutely. Patience, my spirituality, yes. Self-awareness, patience, and understanding. Wonderful. Adaptability, absolutely. We've had to shift and change just in an instant. I know for me, there's been a lot of, compassion and care and yes, flexibility. Somebody said that, patience, embracing the excitement that can come with uncertainty. I love that you said that, Kyle. Yeah, sense of humor, check myself, perspective, flexibility, tolerance, gratefulness. Yeah, absolutely. Right along with challenge is always opportunity, right? There's always an opportunity there. So thank you for that. And feel free to keep sharing your thoughts there, but there's lots of strengths that we've all had to rely on it. And those are part of the resiliency that we've built and had to continue to build on and that we need moving forward. So thank you for sharing some of those qualities. I know there's lots more. We're good at kindness. Thank you, Lola. Yes. So cultivating well-being in schools, we all need this, right? This is just an essential element of life that I do think the pandemic has really kind of, it's brought well-being as a priority up into, in focus for so many of us. And so that's one of the benefits, is that we're paying attention to well-being, and that is so fundamental to everything. So when we're talking about well-being in schools, I would like to suggest that we take an ecological perspective, and that we really see schools as an ecology, as a garden, that we see our classrooms as a garden, that we see our offices as our garden, and that we think about what supportive seeds can we plant that can generate wonderful things. And are there any weeds? Are there any weeds that we can pluck from our environment? So I'd like you to just consider that when we're thinking about well-being, that we're thinking about it from this ecological, environmental perspective. So we want to create an environment of well-being, which is a little different than just having a really cool activity that we do at some point in time, right? So we're wanting to think about it holistically, ecologically, because all things are interconnected. And if we think about the garden metaphor, then we can consider, what kind of seeds can we plant that will just, blossom and add goodness to the environment. So what are some seeds that we can plant? So we can really come from, coming from a trauma and resilience informed perspective, and integrating some practices, social and emotional and relational well-being, paying attention to that, which is what we're doing here. And so many of you are already doing this in your roles, but any seeds we plant around this is only going to support the whole, right? Always thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and working towards having an environment that is fair and diverse and inclusive, and is really thinking about these deep issues and working towards rectifying the wrongs of the past, healing well-being. And really another multiple seeds for practicing, creating a culture of gratitude and appreciation, a culture. So we have like Teacher Appreciation Week, which is awesome for that week. We love that week. And then how do we extend that to just have a culture of appreciation in our environment in schools. Always coming from a strengths-based perspective, and then relationship building, which is so fundamental to learning, to well-being, to resilience. And so these are just multiple, domains of seeds that we can plant. And then there might be some weeds. And for each school site and for each context, those weeds will be particular. So this is a little bit of a conceptual consideration here. What are the seeds that we can plant? And then what are the weeds that we might be able to pluck? Maybe some of the weeds are certain policies or norms or outdated ways of doing things that we can maybe just look at and revise because they're causing stress, but they don't need to. So what are some things that we could revise, some weeds that we can just pluck that are getting in the way of well-being that we can actually remove and then maybe supplement with a supportive seed? So that's the metaphor to keep in mind for today. I'm going to do a quick preview. I know Janice showed you the platform for the video series and the study guides, and I'd like to just give you a sneak peek inside the content so you know what's in there and hopefully are excited to dive in. So there's 4 videos, as you saw. The first is diving into developing a trauma and resilience informed lens. Then the second one is around social emotional learning, providing an overview there. Nurturing teacher well-being is the third module. And this we could substitute for adult well-being. So I say teacher well-being, but we could also just say any adult. And then supporting students' social, emotional, and relational well-being is the 4th video and study guide. So for the first one, all of them, by the way, are research-based, they're standards-based, and they're really meant to be practical and applicable strategies for the classroom, for working with students, with colleagues. There's tools for implementation and some reflection questions for each one of those. So taking a little peek inside. So for the first video on trauma and resilience informed perspective, so putting on the lens of trauma and resilience informed awareness, what we cover is we look at the pandemic and consider it as a collective trauma. So we understand what does that mean? What is, when we define trauma, what is collective trauma? And then we explore what it means to engage with students and colleagues from a trauma and resilience informed perspective. And some of you may already have some training in this, and maybe you're excellent practitioners embodying a trauma and resilience informed approach. So if you're that person at your school site, or you're one of many at your school sites, then you can be a champion of that, and you can be an example and a model. For others that might be, just learning about trauma and resiliency informed perspective, hopefully this is valuable for you as an introduction. We go over the 6 principles of trauma and resilience informed care. And then we get into the practical strategies. How do we cultivate an environment that is informed by an understanding of trauma and resiliency? So we're coming from that perspective. And those are all supportive seeds when we're thinking about our garden of well-being. Some of the practical strategies is practices for maintaining a sense of safety, skills and practices for nurturing a sense of connectedness and cultivating sense of hope. For the second video, when we're looking at social emotional learning generally, we cover some of the overview of the research, just some highlights, and then there's 5 core competencies for anybody who's well-versed in social emotional learning. There's 5 core competencies. And then so we go into practical strategies for cultivating these 5 core SEL skills. And these are them. So this might look familiar to some of you. We get into practical strategies for how do we build self-awareness within ourselves, but also mostly supporting students. Practices and tools for developing self-management, building awareness socially, so social awareness, relationship building skills, and responsible decision-making. So all of these are skills that we can learn. And so we go into practical strategies for how to integrate these into our school. The third video is around nurturing teacher well-being or adult well-being. We cover some research on teacher stress and well-being. There's an urgent call nationwide to support teacher and staff well-being, which is really wonderful. So again, it's really starting to come to the surface as a priority. And And that is just that's just so such a positive shift that we're just going to continue to build on. And so then we get into some practical strategies. How do we support well-being for teachers and adults within the school setting and beyond? So a preview of the practical tips and strategies within the study guide and the video series is we talk about how do we create safe and humanizing spaces? What are some ways, practical tools and tips to cultivate a culture of gratitude and appreciation? So it's just literally in the air, it's in the soil, it's in the felt sense of the environment that one feels appreciated and that is like it's a very nurturing quality to have in a school environment. And again, some of you may already have this within your school sites, which is awesome. So you can just build on it. The practice of embracing imperfection, we're going to actually talk about that today. Mindful self-compassion is a research-based practice that's very profound and nurturing, and it really supports resiliency and well-being. And then the social emotional learning toolkit for educators. I'm going to spend just a minute talking about that here. This comes from transformingeducation.org. It's a wonderful organization. And they put together this free toolkit for educators' social emotional development for the self, for the adult. And so they have these little modules with a little PowerPoint slides already ready-made and a little companion guide to guide the learning. And they've identified from the research what they call high leverage practices. So there's 5 high leverage practices that us as the adults in a school setting can cultivate within ourselves so that we can better support and embody social and emotional competency for our students. And so we want to always be thinking about how we're cultivating our own competencies so that we can model and then facilitate them within young people. And so the 5 high leverage practices that have been identified are really looking at our own identity, exploring emotions, cultivating compassion and curiosity, orienting towards optimism, and establishing balance and boundaries. So I have to tell you, when I was in the classroom 20 years ago, I wish that this kind of material and education existed because it would have been tremendously valuable and helpful for me as a classroom teacher working in a very high needs school. So I'm so grateful now to see this work coming out because it is just so fundamentally important to support well-being and social emotional competency development for us as adults. So I highly encourage you to just download it for free. This is in your study guide, by the way, the resource is there. And what's nice about it is you could, learn it just for yourself. It could maybe be a piece of something that happens at a staff meeting or just with a colleague. So anything that we do along the lines of developing these skills for ourselves will be beneficial for everyone, really. So the last video and study guide is around students' social, emotional, and relational well-being. So we cover the 2 major key areas to focus on as a starting point, which is fostering a sense of safety and building positive relationships. Again, so many of us in schools are already doing this, so it might just strengthen the work that you're already doing. And there's practical strategies for doing both of these. And here are the strategies that we go over. We talk about ways to build community, giving students a sense of control, what that might look like in a classroom, promoting predictability and consistency and why that's so important, especially at this time. We talk about, we engage in strategies for strengthening relationships, and then really highlighting this practice of circle as a powerful way to support students' social, emotional, and academic and relational well-being. So we're going to do, so that's what's inside the, in the little course. I hope that you dive into it. I hope it's valuable for you, practical for you. For our webinar, I thought we could do a little practice here as adults, strengthening our own social emotional competencies. And we're going to start with a video around developing emotional intelligence. This is at the core of SEL. So I hope that you enjoy it.
Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize, interpret, and process emotions in yourself and others. While genetics, upbringing, and environment all play a role, there are steps you can take to develop your emotional intelligence over time. Get to know yourself. Emotionally intelligent people are self-aware. They have a realistic appreciation of their strengths and weaknesses and how they come across to others. Peer feedback is one way of improving your self-awareness and may uncover a few of your emotional blind spots. Learn your triggers. Linked to the notion of self-awareness is knowing how you are likely to respond in particular situations. Think about how you felt the last time you were under pressure. Did these feelings help or hinder you? Recognizing emotions and the source of these emotions can shift your emotional state. Empathize. Seeing things from someone else's perspective will help you understand their values and beliefs. This is important when it comes to motivating and engaging others. Make a conscious effort to get to know your colleagues. Ask open questions and actively listen to what they have to say, rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak. Be on the lookout for body language and other non-verbal signs, as these may tell you more than someone is willing to express out loud. Own your emotions. Part of being emotionally intelligent is about taking responsibility for the way you interact with others. If someone upsets you, pause and reflect on why their actions led you to feel this way, instead of reacting impulsively. Recognize that a conversation is a two-way interaction, and it takes two people to make you angry, sad, or frustrated. Go with your gut. Finally, listen to your body. If your stomach starts doing backflips every time you speak to a senior manager, or your muscles tense up before you go into a meeting, what does this tell you? Counterintuitive as it might seem, emotions can be a valuable source of information when making rational decisions at work. Remember, emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about learning how to recognize, process, and channel them in a way that benefits you and your team. Enhancing your emotional intelligence requires effort, but it can be achieved with sustained practice.
Okay. So now we're gonna do a little interactive activity. So when we're thinking about building our emotional intelligence, it can be very helpful to build our emotional vocabulary. So in the chat, in a few moments, you're gonna receive a link to a website that has a list of emotional words that we're gonna be working with. And we're gonna be working with another research-based practice called Name It to Tame It. Thank you, Susan. Susan has put the link in the chat. So you can go ahead and open that and I'll explain what we're gonna do with it. So Name It to Tame It is really a helpful strategy for managing our emotions. And essentially what it is, and there's a lot of research behind it, but kind of the practical bottom line of this practice is, if we can identify precisely what we are feeling in any given moment, that's going to tame the cascade of physiological response. And so it's very powerful how that works. And Daniel Siegel explains this very well. And you can look it up in in videos if you'd like to see more about it. But name it to tame it. If we can name how we're feeling, then it allows us to kind of soothe our entire nervous system and calm and regulate. So it's helpful to have some vocabulary to be more precise about what we're naming. So when you're looking at the link, if you can open that up, this comes from the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And when you open the link, you're going to see it's going to look a little bit different than this. This is a PDF version. You're going to see it one list and then the next list on the bottom. You'll be able to download this feelings inventory in the top right of the website. So you'll be able to access this if you like. I highly suggest and recommend printing this out and having it nearby you for your own self and also to support a colleague or a student as well. And so what you'll notice about this list is that the top list, the one that's on the screen now, these are a range of feelings when our needs are satisfied. So when our needs are met, these are the types of emotional experiences that we might experience. So I'm going to give you a moment to just glance through either what's on the screen or if you have it on your computer. Looking at the top list, feelings when your needs are satisfied. Just take a minute or so to glance through these. And even just consider, have you felt any of these this week? Just kind of mental note to yourself, which of these feelings have you experienced this week? And so as we're looking at this list, we can go to the next one, which is a different list. And this is when our feelings are not satisfied. So when our human needs are not met or not satisfied, we might feel any of these range of emotional experiences. So take a look and see, have you felt any of these this week? And so what's helpful about building our emotional vocabulary is that you can see that there's a range of feeling tones, right? Like if we think about, for example, fear, there's a difference between nervous and petrified, right? Like the depth of petrified, that's a very deep, intense form of fear. Nervous is, it's a little bit more subtle, it's still present, but it has a different depth to it than petrified, right? And so, so why is this important? Because if we can be precise with how we name our emotional states, again, we're able to name it and then tame the whole system. It just helps us regulate. Okay, so and we don't often have such a range of vocabulary, so having a list that we can kind of scan through and be like, let's see, what am I? This doesn't feel, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not exactly sure what I feel. Let me look. Oh, yes, this describes it a little bit. Actually, this is even more precise, right? So building our emotional intelligence using these vocabularies. So I'm going to invite you to, using the list, see if you can just throw in the chat 3 feelings that you've experienced this week. It could be a range of them. So what are 3 feelings that you yourself can identify that you have definitely experienced? And let's keep in mind that if you're a human being, which of course we all are here, we will experience the full range, right? And they're all valuable and necessary part of our human experience. So there's confident, curious, frustrated, tired, annoyed, excited, compassionate, calm, overwhelmed. Thank you, Danitza. Exhausted, lost, excited, agitated. Worried, compassionate, quiet. Thank you, Brittany. Frustration, joy, calm, fatigue. And we can see something like fatigue is in response to a human need for rest and rejuvenation, right? So if that human need is not being met, then we will experience fatigue, right? So I love thinking about it as it related to our needs. What else? Relaxed, displeased, interesting, energetic, tired, anxiety, perplexed, exhausted, agitated, energetic, lively, torn, distracted. So we can see, I mean, we can experience this full range within a day, within an hour, right? Like we could be feeling calm and, at ease. And then we get that email or we hear these news and boom, we're in a completely different state, right? Thankful, frustrated, relaxed, content, energetic, annoyed, burnt out. We have the full range. Thank you so much for sharing those. So I really just want to validate that as human beings, agitated, hurt, sad, yes. And in a group, in a classroom, in a staff meeting, there's going to be the full range. And again, it shifts and changes throughout the day. So if we can be precise about what it is for us, we can identify it and then we can, work to soothe ourselves and then move through it. So, let's do a quick little practice. So in the chat, using your list, we don't know what's going on inside another human being, right? But just from the expression, what are some feeling words that you would attribute to this expression of the woman? Excited, joy, surprise, could be surprised. Thank you, Anna. Giddy, grateful, delighted, elated, right? These are really great words. Enthusiasm, anticipation, right? So we can think about anticipation and surprise are different, and yet they might be expressed in a similar way, right? So let's just take a look. We don't really know, but the point is that it could be any of these. She could even be embarrassed, right? Surprised, excited, delighted. So we don't really know, but we can be curious about what might be happening for another and definitely curious about what's happening within ourselves. Okay, what about this man? What are some feeling words from your list that you might attribute? Pondering, confused. Thank you, Malika. Thoughtful, worried, perplexed, dread, right? These are very sorrowful, different, pondering and sorrowful, anxious. Yeah. We don't know, but it could be any of these, right? Thank you for adding those in the list, everyone. Annoyed, frustrated, hurt, angry, scared, confused, right? Perplexed. Yeah. So last one, what would you attribute to this expression? We're doing this so you get used to looking at your list. Sad, yeah, worry, lost. Alarmed, stressed, yeah, concerned, absolutely. Fragile, right? It could be any of these, right? Disappointed, sad, mourning, anxious, hopeless, torn, worried. So I hope that you're starting to see that the vocabulary is helpful. We can't really know what's happening for somebody else, but if we had the list and that person's not really sure how they're feeling, or we're not sure how we're feeling, when we start to look at the range and start to be able to detect it, it helps us. It helps us because we're become aware. Oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling perplexed or confused, or I'm feeling hurt, right? And then as we become aware, then we have understanding for ourselves as to why we might be feeling that way. And as we build awareness and understanding of ourselves, then we're able to manage and regulate that. And so as we work with this within ourselves, then we can support students, right? And colleagues to be able to name it, to tame it. So hopefully that you find that valuable. I highly encourage you to download the feelings vocabulary list, have it around you. It's very helpful. And you can be a supportive person for somebody else to help them identify what they might be feeling. That'll help the management and for yourself as well. So we're going to move into nurturing teacher adult well-being, and the strategy is a research-based practice called mindful self-compassion. Some of you may know about this. This comes from the research of Dr. Kristen Neff out of the University of Austin, Texas. There's a lot of research on this practice, a very beautiful practice, and a depth of benefits on a well-being and relational physiological level. So let's just start by looking at this picture. Now, this is very clean, very neat, and it would be amazing if life internally and externally felt this clean and clean cut and nice and tidy, right? I would like this. And we might have pockets when things are totally in order and clean and neat in life. But for the most part, especially once the pandemic hit, this is kind of what is more typical of the life experience, right? Especially in schools. It's like, it can be messy. It can be messy. We can feel this way inside. It can feel this way outside. And so it's normal if this is how you experience things. We all do. And so the idea here is that we can practice embracing imperfection. And there's benefits to that, because as we just do our best to live up to our own ideals and our standards of excellence and the work that we're called to do in our own unique roles, we can leave room to just embrace imperfection, because it allows us to connect to our own humanity. We can be real about the challenges. Embracing imperfections allows us to be more authentic. And I think a lot of us have gotten to be more authentic in a sense, given all the challenges we've been facing these last 2 years. It allows us to model for children and students that it's okay to make mistakes, to have flaws, to falter at times. And one of my favorite things is embracing imperfection always provides opportunities for reflection and improvement. So it's not like we say, oh, well, that didn't work out. Okay, doesn't matter. We say, wait a second. So like, okay, that didn't work out. That's all right. But what can I learn from that experience, and how can I reflect and improve so that next time it's a little tighter, it's a little bit more, whatever it is that we're attempting to do, a little more valuable, or whatever it might be. And it really can inspire creative solutions and innovations. And it just really also mirrors the nature of reality. So of course, reality, nature, if we look at it, nature is, in like the ocean, sometimes it's calm and peaceful, and sometimes it can be tumultuous. And this is life, right? Waves of challenge can come over into our lives, and we can't always control the waves. We can learn how to navigate them, and really, kind of remembering, especially during challenging times, that that we're doing the best that we can, right? And that being gentle with ourselves and each other can be very helpful. And so thinking about compassion, which is the root of mindful self-compassion, I would just love to hear a few shares in the chat. What are some words that you associate with compassion? Let's see, kindness, caring. Yeah. Let's see, listening, understanding, empathy, generosity, understanding. Yeah. Concern. Thank you, Tim. Patience. Wonderful. So, and please feel free to keep adding in the support. Thank you, Emily. So we can think about just a basic definition for compassion is a sensitivity to the suffering of others and a desire to try to alleviate it. Thank you, silence. Yeah, not being quick to respond to give guidance. Thank you, Malika. Kindness. So sorry, I'm like looking at the chat and so many great sharings. Yeah, so compassion, a sensitivity to the suffering of others and a desire to try to alleviate it, right? So we're gonna keep in mind everything that was just shared in the chat. We're gonna watch another video, and then we're gonna look into how this applies to self-compassion, okay?
Hi, Kaz. Hi, Shelley. As you know, we are producing a course called The Power of Self-Compassion. So we're just talking to people today about how they treat themselves. Do you have a critical voice? And if so, what do you find it saying to you?
I definitely have a critical voice. I think everybody does. And I think they all start from when you're a kid. So, I think all the things that my parents said, I hear, but it's normally about not doing a good job.
It's constantly stopping me as I try to complete thoughts or try to make steps forward.
It's a voice that always tells me that I'm not enough, or that I need to do better, or that there's something about me that I have to change.
When you fail or make a mistake, what types of things run through your mind?
I'm not worthy. Everybody's going to see my mistake. Nobody else makes mistakes like I do.
You're stupid. I can't believe you forgot something easy. This was basic. Why are you having so much trouble doing something so simple?
People don't want me around, that I'm uninteresting, boring, and or just too weird for people's company.
It says that I should have done better, and sometimes it says mean words about myself.
It's probably the loudest thing that's usually coming through my head before anything else, is at least ringing that failure over and over again.
And let me give you a scenario where a friend of yours comes to you, has made a mistake, and what would you say to that friend?
Well, the first thing I would tell them that it's okay. You don't need to feel all the weight of this.
Most likely you're holding on to this more tightly than anybody else.
This in no way, reflects your character or reflects your ability to do something. Definitely a lot kinder to my friends than I am to myself.
How do you think you would change if you used that same voice that you use towards your friends on yourself during those moments of failure and mistakes?
I think it would be, incredible, because you're not going to talk to your friends the way that you talk to yourself sometimes. And I think that if you're constantly kind of reassuring yourself and letting yourself know that you are enough, then your thought process will change.
When you treat yourself like you do somebody else, you start feeling better, I think, right away, and you keep it in context much more instead of letting things be blown out of proportion.
I think I would have a lot less anxiety in my day-to-day. I think there would be kind of a weight lifted.
It would definitely make me feel better and happier, because when I usually say, when that voice that says mean stuff in my head, I'm not really happy and sad.
How could the world look differently if we were more compassionate towards ourselves?
I think the world would work better. I think through compassion and self-compassion, we all would just recognize that we're all human.
As a society, we could learn to love one another and show that love on a regular basis. I think that this world would be perfect.
There's a saying that if you love yourself, then you can love others. Well, sometimes I believe it goes in the reverse, and that if you can show that compassion that you show to others and bring it into yourself, I think that's where true growth can happen.
I think it would be magical. That's really the only word for it, magical, to be able to reflect on ourselves from a place of love rather than criticism.
Okay, I love that video. I hope that you found it meaningful. If we had more time, I would love to hear responses. But if we think about compassion, we think about the circle of compassion. This is a concept that is credited to Kristen Neff in the Mindful Self-Compassion course, which is very powerful, whether it's in person or online. So we think about ourselves as this little yellow ball and everyone else inside the circle. So friends, neighbors, colleagues, students, family members, even strangers that we don't know. If we know that they're having a hard time or having a challenge, we have compassion for them, right? We want to be better for them. When we're thinking about self-compassion, is really including ourselves in the circle of compassion. Right? So we bring ourselves into the circle of compassion so that we give ourselves the same type of care and kindness, patience, some of those words that you all said, right? Kindness, understanding, patience, consideration, and support that we would give a good friend, right? So it's really bringing ourselves into that circle of compassion. Now, we won't do this poll, but just in your mind, what do you think tends to be easier? Giving compassion to others, receiving compassion from others, or giving compassion to ourselves? Giving compassion to others. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Yes, that is consistent with the research. For whatever reason, either if it's conditioning, socialization, what have you, we have more experience giving compassion to others and less practice giving it to ourselves. So number 3 is a new practice for us, especially in education, because we're so giving and we're always giving to our students. We're always thinking about other people's needs. And so the practice of self-compassion is new and very powerful. That's why I selected that for your support pack. It's an audiobook on mindful self-compassion. I highly recommend it. I wish I had known this practice like 20 years ago. It would have saved me a whole lot of inner angst and supported well-being and resilience. So 3 components of mindful self-compassion. The first is mindfulness. The second is a shared sense of shared humanity and sending care to ourselves. So very briefly, mindfulness is really just bringing into awareness what's here. So if we can identify, kind of like the name it to tame it, but if we can just kind of acknowledge the challenge or acknowledge the suffering, if we can just say to ourselves, gosh, this is really hard. I'm really struggling with this. We're just bringing awareness to what is happening internally. That's the first step. Then we connect it, we can connect it to a shared humanity. I know I'm not alone. I'm not the only person overwhelmed. Anyone in the situation would likely share similar feelings. Then we can connect to humanity. This is what it feels like to be overwhelmed. And then what can we do to send care to ourselves? That's the kind of action step. How can I support myself right now? What can I do to care for myself right now? So this is a practice of self-compassion. I won't have time to go over this. I can see I'm looking at the time. We have about 2 minutes, but I just want to mention this is also in the study guide. This is a relational well-being practice that I love so much. I encourage you to find a way to do this either with just a partner, a colleague, anybody, because it's very powerful. It could be done in small groups. It could be done in partnerships. And what it is we just can literally take a few minutes to mirror strengths that we see in another person. We can give them compliments. We can express a quality that we admire or appreciate about them. We can send well wishes to them. We can share appreciation. I've done this with teachers in groups, and we just literally take 10 minutes. Each person, gets 2 minutes to be showered with appreciation from their colleagues, all strengths-based, all mirroring, showing strengths. And then we take turns being in the awesome chair. It's very nourishing. It really supports a strong relationship building and positive bonds as colleagues. And so I kind of noted here how to do it. It's very simple. If you're like a group of 3 or 4, you identify one person to be in the awesome chair, choose a timekeeper, 2 minutes is plenty. And then the group shares all this appreciation and mirroring of strengths for the whole time. The receiver just has to open up and receive everything, take it all in. And then when it time's up, then you nominate the next person to be in the awesome chair. It's very fun. It could be done in a very short period of time. And it's profound in how it actually shifts and builds relationships with colleagues and students. So I suggest that you use it. And so we're going to be wrapping up now. And here are the 4 videos, the topics that are in there for you with the study guides. I hope you find it valuable. And I'll just conclude by reminding us that we can think about well-being as our garden. What are the seeds that we can plant, and are there any weeds we can pluck so that we have a healthy, happy, thriving school environment for both children and adults? And so I'll pause there. Thank you so much. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'm going to hand it over to Janice to wrap us up. Thank you all for being here.